Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SmarTech Spotlight. Today, we're going to be meeting with a great partner of ours, White Rabbit Group. They are a wonderful development firm that we've personally partnered with. We've got introduced to them about 6 months ago, and we're starting our first couple projects, but we really wanted to work with you to showcase what White Rabbit Group is doing and some of the ways they're kind of trend setting in the industry. We're going to welcome Adam, who is one of the leaders there, and we're going to have him tell us about what they do, what they're doing in the market. And welcome, Adam. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Bryan. Appreciate it. Thanks, Billy. I'm excited to talk with you guys. Yeah, I feel like you guys are really kind of, on the cutting edge of the search side of things, and with especially with, ad management. You brought up something to me on our last conversation, Bryan, about some of the changes coming up with Google that I wasn't even aware of in terms of, third party third party cookies. So, which is something maybe you can speak to at some point, but
Definitely.
yeah, we're excited to partner. I think our whole, ethos as a company is, connecting with other agencies that don't specialize in development, which is a lot of companies.
Most agencies.
Totally. Yeah. There's branding companies out there that are, really into kind of the logo and the aesthetics and setting the brand and positioning. And they may be led by, a strategic thinker or a branding, logo designer, graphic artist. But that's a very different skill set than development. And so whenever their clients logically say, thank you so much for this service you provide, it's great, we now also need that applied to our website or our web app or a mobile app. Can you help us with that? Those agency owners or marketing agency owners either turn that work down because they say that's not really what we do.
Yep.
Or they have to refer it out and they lose out on, hundreds of thousands of dollars or more.
Yeah.
So our whole model is basically partnering with those creative agencies or marketing agencies to sort of be their technical backbone, and execute on the technical side of things and help them, decide what is the best platform to go with, take all those things into consideration. The robust version of that is starting off with like a discovery phase. But we've built out a dedicated estimate team so we can turn around estimates quick, so our partners can get responses to RFPs and
we've
just
experienced
move quick.
that ourselves as well.
Yeah, that speed.
Yeah, it's very, very quick.
And
it's affordable too. I mean, you guys are bringing a reasonable price point to the market for services. So we had a recent one where it hasn't closed yet, but we're trying to work with you guys in a position where we have a Webflow client who also has Pipedrive, and you're trying to figure out how to get the two to connect better. And the team was originally like, yeah, Pipedrive is not 100% in our wheelhouse, but you know what? We'll investigate it and figure out how they work. And that kind of a focal point is really nice to be able to see. It's like, hey, while I understand this thing really, really well, this other thing is obviously connected, and let's figure out how the connections make, how they work, which is important.
Yeah. And we'll tell you, I mean, you just pointed it out. I mean, we'll tell you if we don't have expertise in a certain platform. But right now, I mean, we're, over 100 full-time employees. So, if it's a website, if it's a custom website, if it's a custom web app or mobile app, chances are we've dabbled in those technologies that are supporting those platforms in one way or another. But technologies are always evolving, new ones are popping up. So we're all about just exploring and learning, as we go.
So when it comes to development, would you guys say that your specialty is really more like front-end web development, working with like website platforms like WordPress and Drupal and those kind of elements, or is your specialty more of like the AWS backend database development? Because that development is such a generic term, but being in the industry, I can tell you, I can't even tell you all the different friends that I have in the development world who don't want to work on websites. They're dealing with AWS, they're dealing with servers, they're dealing with all those other things that are development, but not actually like web development. So talk to me about how our clients or how the people working with you guys, what is the difference between those developer kind of positions and where do you guys kind of sit in that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's changed over time. I think when we were smaller, when we started, I think we were doing a lot more WordPress, front end driven type websites, whether it was highly interactive or there was some kind of sort of complex animation to it, kind of award winning level design. That was something I think that's where we started. And part of our DNA is pixel perfection. It's like something we always speak about. I mean, our podcast is called the Pixel Perfect Podcast. And I think that started from, just recognizing that designers always really wanted to make sure it would like match their designs perfectly.
Yep.
So I would say, I feel like we kind of started more as a front end driven company, but I don't know if our founders would totally agree with that. They were started by Greg and Abalash. One is more of a front end developer. Abalash is more of a back end developer. So they really came together with both those skill sets early on. And I think now, our team's built out so well. I would say we're pretty well rounded. We do projects that are still that interactive, award-winning, kind of immersive, like, whoa, this is an amazing kind of experience. But then we're very heavy on the back end side of things when it comes out to building out, really complex databases that need to integrate with a lot of different things. That happens quite a bit, I would say, in our team space these days. So yeah, it's kind of a balance. I feel like we're actually moving a little bit more towards the complex web app and mobile app space. Our DevOps team and tech ops is really robust. So, like one project we're working on right now, which is the second year working with them, is the Game Awards, where I don't know if you heard of the Game Awards, but is
it like the video game specific awards, or is it more like other aspects of the games?
Yeah, it's basically like the Oscars, but for games.
Okay.
So there's all different kind of categories. They have a physical event in Los Angeles. It's an incredible event. And it's actually bigger than the Oscars, technically, by numbers. In fact, last year they received over 45 million votes through the website.
Wow.
Globally. And this all happens over a span of days. So
that's interesting. I know gaming is a huge industry, and it's bigger than TV and music combined. It's crazy huge.
I know. I'm personally not a gamer, but yeah, every time I look at the numbers on it, it blows my mind. People are really into gaming these days, and yeah, it's a great industry to go after.
I definitely relate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's that's an example of where you got to really make sure that everything is set up properly, because you have people trying to get in there, hack it, different things like that. So security is really important.
Makes sense.
So yeah, to answer your question, I would say it's at this point, it's probably 50-50, but I think as we do more complex work, we're just going to keep getting more complex builds.
Interesting. Yeah. So if someone were to come to you guys and needed AWS database work, is that something you guys would consider as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any website platforms that you're seeing kind of take the lead in terms of, kind of what they're doing? And I ask that question as a marketer, we are stuck in a industry where you're understaffed, you're trying to figure out ways to solve problems. And so oftentimes we lean towards, I would say, kind of your plug and play models, your Squarespace, your Duda Mobile back in the day. There was Duda Mobile was a website builder back in the day we used to use, your Wix. And from an SEO standpoint, I remember years ago, I mean, I've been in the industry now since 2008, 15 years. And I remember SEO, you would try to optimize a Wix website back in the day when it was basically just an iframe, and Google would not even see the title because it was just an image. They couldn't even see it. But with that being said, we have obviously, as marketers, we lean towards that. Can we get this done with the minimal viable product? And that's not necessarily the best use case sometimes. But if you're looking for a landing page, or if it's a local business, sometimes it's all you got. But what are you seeing as far as some of those platforms, like Squarespace and them? Are they gaining legitimacy? Are they gaining competency as far as what they're doing? What are the ones that you find the easiest to work with?
Yeah. I can't speak too much as far as Squarespace or Wix. And I'm sure there's other competitors coming up. I feel like there's a lot of room in that space to grow. It's giving accessibility to startups and to folks that are, trying to start a side hustle, or, just low on funding, but they have a good product or good idea, good service. So I love those platforms for that reason. I don't really view them kind of as a threat to what we do, because I think it's pretty different. Like what we do is more custom. And, in terms of SEO, I mean, I think big trend that I see and have been seeing is going headless. Going headless on the CMS basically separates the front end and back end and allows the site to load a lot faster. So that's something we do a lot more. Yeah, it definitely takes a little bit more work on the build. I mean, it usually takes about maybe 30-40%. Closer to 30% more effort, I would say, to build it headless. But that's a big trend that we're seeing. I would say some other CMS platforms we see coming up is Strappy is a new one we're pretty bullish about. We were kind of new to Strappy about a year ago, and now I would say it's one of our top 5 competencies. It's just a great CMS, especially when you're building the headless website. Contentful is another one. It's still amazing to me that WordPress is still so popular. Like if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have thought it still would have been as popular as it is. And we still get a lot of WordPress builds.
I mean, they're mostly fixes, right? Because WordPress tends to go down, get hacked. It's bad. I mean, we personally have seen a lot of WordPress challenges in our marketing side of it, because we see a lot of people who don't know any better and they don't update they don't update their apps. The apps get hacked. Those apps are no longer safe, but they don't know that. They don't update the app, so the site's now vulnerable. And it's all a matter of ignorance feeds ignorance, right? And these people who have these WordPress sites, who have their brother's uncle build it for them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those oftentimes are the ones where they're getting their entire domain scrubbed. We actually had a client where their entire website went offline, couldn't figure out why, and it was because there was a plugin that was on their site that was like 5 years old that had been updated with a bug fix, and the person got in through that plugin and basically stole the entire site.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it's terrible. You're right. I mean, it happens a lot. And I think it's also due to the fact that WordPress is so big. It just it has a bullseye on its back. So I don't know, but I'm the more we work in WordPress, the more I'm a big believer in WordPress and the WordPress community. We're actually considering becoming a WordPress VIP member, which is a WordPress VIP hosting platform. I would maybe the last thing I'll say on WordPress is it's such a flexible tool that it really depends on how good the developer is and the team working on the platform, and it can very easily set up in the wrong way, but it can also be done in the right way.
True. Yeah, it's one of those tools where do you guys do maintenance programs on just making sure that the site's basically not capable of being hijacked?
We do. Yeah, it's not a big part of our business model, but yeah, we support maintenance for sure. Yeah, you need to.
Now, you specifically are creative by nature, right? Like you came in, we talked about this before, you came in as a creative element. You kind of bring a creative element to the team. For me, when it comes to websites, I feel like creative is one of the most overwhelming bits because a lot of developers aren't designers. A lot of designers aren't developers. And a lot of the graphic designers that we've worked in the past, the idea of coding like an entire, framework for a website visually, it seems to be a very specialty skill set, right? So talk to us about how you feel graphic design and development play together. Is there separation of the two, right? Is it better to have a designer come in and then bring you guys in? How does that relationship typically work? What do you recommend? And if you guys were working with an agency partner, are you kind of filling both roles for them, or do you recommend having a secondary graphic designer kind of on retainer?
Yeah, most of our partnerships are, I would say, the partner is doing the creative most times. Not all the time. Just to give you an idea, I mean, we're about 100 people. I would say we're about 90% on the development engineering side with our capabilities and our roles. So we do have a design team in-house. Everyone's in-house, by the way. We don't outsource anything ourselves, just because our partners are relying on us for that.
Right.
But yeah, I could definitely speak to the connection between the creative and the development, because it's really important. There's a couple pitfalls I see some partners have is that, if they're like a graphic designer, but they're not like a web designer or UI UX designer, they may design something that would look like a great brochure. But when you translate that to a website or a responsive website, it's like, well, you really didn't think that through, and
Yeah.
so
Oh yeah.
sometimes that happens, but that's also kind of, we're okay with that. Like, we're okay meeting those partners kind of halfway in the middle, in the sense, because we're there to support them. We're there to support creatives. That's kind of a big part of our ethos. So in that specific example, we'd want to review their designs before they're finalized, before they share them with the client. And we can give them feedback. Like, our UX designer can hop on a call with them and point out where there's some challenges. And hopefully we can bring some education to the table, so that, they not only fix this website, but any future builds, they're so much more confident designing in Figma,
Right.
or whatever it may be. They know, okay, this may look cool, but that's actually a real red flag for development. So I'm going to avoid that next time, or here's like an alternative to that. So I think that's a really important area that we can provide value in, is those really non-technical but very creative partners. And then, the other thing I'll say is, before White Rabbit, it's kind of related, is my own journey coming to White Rabbit, because I had another agency of my own.
Yeah, we talked about that.
It was a smaller agency, a design agency. We had a handful of employees, and I always struggled with developers because I was very creative and I lacked on the technical skills. So eventually I found White Rabbit and I outsourced to them, and it went so well that after, I think just a year or two, they ended up acquiring my company. And I joined as a partner. And so I feel like I have a unique perspective where I really understand the value of being that creative, and not, like, I understand the pain point, I should say, of being that creative and not having a good executor. And then when you find a partner that is a great executor, you just really appreciate it, especially when you've gone through like a dozen different development agencies, like I did, like, really went through the ringer, and you get burned. I mean, I don't, if anyone's been through this, it's like you spend all that time and money and effort to earn a client, earn their respect, earn their trust. You start working with them. It's going great. You're getting some results, but now you bring in the development piece and you miss a deadline, you miss another deadline, things don't match their expectations or what the designs you sent. There's all these different problems, and that can negate the whole experience you created for that customer, prior to that.
Makes a big difference.
Then you don't get referrals. Like, it just really hurts your business. So you got to have good partners. You got to be able to have that side of it taken care of.
So Adam, that's actually really good intro into one of my questions for you. And as a partner, I'm always looking to improve and obviously deliver the best result, both for our customer, but then also the relationship. So from your perspective, what are some of the key aspects of a successful referral partnership, as well as key aspects to a good client relationship? So as we bring customers to you, or others bring customers to you, what should we be looking for that's going to be like, hey, this is going to be a really good relationship, or hey, this is actually going to be a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind of maybe a challenge, I would say, is like champagne taste on a Ford budget kind of thing. That's the biggest red flag. It's like when they start showing you, stripe.com, or, some of these incredible websites, so they have whole entire dedicated teams of people probably making a couple, $250,000 a year or whatever, to build and maintain this thing. And then they say they want to have that, and they will also want it done in 6 months, so things like that, just unrealistic expectations. But that's not like a deal breaker, as long as they're open to being coached, then that can be overcome. I would say what I found to make a really good partnership is, the coachability on both sides. So for example, if you guys tell me something's going to take 100 hours that I don't know how to do, but my just initial thought was like, oh, that should only take like an hour, right? Why is it taking so long? Asking you, can you help me understand this? Like, I want to make sure I understand like why that's taking so long. So that way I can communicate to my clients. I think sometimes people are afraid to ask those questions. But it's good when there's a little bit of overlap of knowledge so that you can help in that transitional phase from handing clients back and forth. So I think that's a big one. And then just, basic respect for one another, which, frankly, that gets built up over time, like that trust. But, as they say, trust but verify. But like, yeah, definitely showing that client that you trust who you're handing them off to.
Yeah, that's good. And that makes sense. I think that is reflected in how we look at our customers as well. Obviously communication, the trust, the proper expectations, or the ability to be okay adjusting your expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any red flags that you guys see or make sure to look out for?
Personally, I would say people that when we go to partner with a development firm, typically a red flag for us is when they have never really done a lot of experience working in like Tag Manager or working with like Google Analytics code. And we don't necessarily, as a marketing agency, speak developer, right? We speak implementation needs. We speak, install this pixel, and we need these data layer variables implemented, and we need this, first party cookie data to be able to pass back into Google. A lot of times developers can be so stuck in their way about not wanting to go out of their way to learn something new or to understand something new, that they just basically are like, yeah, I don't really do that. That's not my thing. Or what I think is sometimes even worse is when they just kind of like assume that it's going to be easier than it is. Like, oh, I know, I can figure it out. Well, sure, you can figure it out, but I can tell you, I work in this industry. I deal with this every single day, and Google Analytics GA4 is still an absolute nightmare that most of us have no idea what is actually happening. So for you as a developer to tell me, I'll figure it out, like it's not necessarily the language you speak every day. I would like to see someone who comes at it, and you guys' team did this. You were like, hey, you know what? I don't work in that every day, so let me do some research and figure out what it is you're referring to, because that's not typical for us, right? And even on the topic of the cookies, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, like you were kind of like, hey, I'm not aware of that. Let me do some research and get back to you, because this sounds really impactful. And so for me, developers who are too cool for school, developers who don't really want to engage past their current level of knowledge because they don't want to take the time to learn something new, and developers who are too flippant with, oh yeah, I'll figure it out. Like that doesn't give me confidence that you're actually able to get the job done, and that you're going to charge me for 8 hours of you on YouTube going, how does this work? So that's, for me, those are my red flags when it comes to working with a development partner personally that I've experienced. Billy, what about you?
Yeah, I think you nailed pretty much all of them. And, just to ask that same question of ourselves, I think it's the people who are afraid or don't want to say, I don't know. Right. And that's what you were saying, obviously, Brian, but I like to tell our account managers often that our clients don't expect us to know everything, but they expect us to know how to find out. And if we can't find out, or we pretend that we know without knowing, that's when we get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's a level of arrogance, I think, in just like how people approach that. And I think there's a lot of value in working with companies where there's humility in what they do. Like, yeah, we're great at what we do. We're great. But these 1, 2, 3 things are just outside of our scope. So let's work on it together. Like, let's try to figure out how to solve this problem. Which again, on the couple of instances of how you guys, that tends to be the mentality that we've gotten back, which is, hey, that's a good problem. I'm not trying to solve that, but we'll figure it out,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's part of building trust. I mean, we just landed a project today actually that was a mobile app project we've been working on. I think we reached out to them back in March, and they ended up going with another competitor who was a little bit more affordable, and it didn't work out. But then they came back, and just the trust is like so established now. And this is, I think a little bit of a humble brag, and I'm pretty excited about it because we just closed it. But I really think, and this is why I brought it up, is because when we always announce things in Slack, like, so the team knows, like, big wins, like, hey, we just, closed this big project, or, whatever it may be. But I think the big takeaway from that one is it's all about relationships. Like, I don't have any tattoos, but I think if I did, I think I would just get one right on my arm that just says it's all about relationships, because it seriously is, and part of what makes a good relationship is the trust. I mean, that's like a central piece of that. And and so if you're just upfront about things you can't do, when you actually tell them, hey, I can actually do this, right, they're going to trust you. And so you just got to be willing to kind of take that hit. And maybe it's a mindset thing. Like, people just don't want to say that they can't do something, or that they don't have a capability, but you just can't do it all. So you just have to accept that fact.
Yeah, some of our best deals. I was going to say, some of our best deals and growth have come from building strong relationships with our point of contact, and they go somewhere else and they eventually bring us with, right? I was doing some kind of thought processing on what's been successful for us, and several of our largest customers came from some form of relationship referral that just took years and years in the making. So absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. It's always funny when you look at the web, right? When you trace it back and you're like, this person told about this person, who told this person, who told that person. It's always a fun thing to do.
I always think about the idea of, was it 7 degrees of separation between any given person?
Yeah.
It's always interesting to think like how a lot of times like those networks really do work out that way. Maybe not 7, but you're looking pretty close.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. So back to the creative just for a moment, because I feel like this is something that a lot of people might value. So put you on the spot here, right? If I had to ask for the top 5 recommendations that you'd give a new or up and coming graphic designer who wants to be able to design for websites, what are the top 5 things you would tell them to help them prepare to be able to give you content that you can actually work with well?
Oh, you took an interesting turn at the end of that question. Say that again. What would I tell the designer?
If there's a designer that you're trying to get a website design for, right? And your goal is to take that and build a site based on it, but their design needs to be copacetic to what is possible. Like we talked about, mobile designs versus like being responsive. Do they recognize proportions? Those kind of things. You're taking a project from design to development. What is this designer, what 5 things does this designer need to know, or recommendations you'd give them to make sure that they can successfully complete their part in a way where you guys can just be off and running?
Yeah. Well, I would say maybe the first thing is learn Figma, which is such a blanket one, because, Figma right there, it gets handed over in such a way for the developer to take it. It's just better than any other platform. I mean, there's XD out there as well.
Figma, Figma?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah, Figma is just on the cutting edge. I mean, they're creating a lot of tools that are, I think they just came out with like developer mode, where developers can go in there and actually extract like code from the design files. There's a lot of really cool things that Figma's doing. I mean, that's why they got bought by Adobe for like $20 billion.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like one of the biggest SaaS sales in a long time. Yeah, Figma is just incredible. So I would say definitely learn Figma. I would also say it depends on what type of design it is, like if it's a web app or if it's a marketing website. If it's a marketing website, I would probably spend some time learning about conversion rate optimization. Just Google search, like, what is conversion rate optimization? There's some key, like, basic principles. Yeah. Like, I mean, certain placements where people expect things, like if you're going to scan a website and look for the phone number, like you're actually going to go to the top right corner. Your eyes do like a little movement, like an F, where you kind of scan the left side, go over to the right, go back down and scan again. So there's little things like that. There's principles that you can apply so that you can maximize the effectiveness of the website. You want to make sure
it's a great recommendation.
You're telling the story properly. I mean, the hero, sometimes you see websites that are so grandiose, like, an innovative product to save you time and money. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, it's not specific at all. Like, if you were to see that as a headline. So, part of CRO principles is like, you need to be able to clearly tell in like 1 or 2 sentences, like what it is that you guys do, why the users should give a shit, why they should care.
Yep.
And what you want them to do next. Like, what's your call to action? So things like that. I would say CRO, learn Figma. And then, those are really, really some big ones. Just responsive design, just understand the principles of responsive design, how things shrink down and stack. That's huge. And yeah, good. I think that'll get you off to the races.
Okay.
So it's just those 3.
How much of that do you think for the designers is copywriting versus design, right? Because copywriting seems to be something that a lot of people underestimate the value of. But like you just said, like you can just BS the copy on a website and send it off to design and development, and the client gets it and they're like, what's up with this headline? What's up with this messaging? What's up with these details? Like, what is this? Oh
man, gosh, I could talk to you all day about copywriting. Copywriting is one of those things that it's typically separate from design. Like, people think about it like, oh, this is copywriting and then this is UI UX. But if you think about it, like, what is a letter? It's literally just a graphical element, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another letter, and they string together to tell your brain some sort of meaning, which is the same thing with a website. Like, there's a graphical element here, there's a graphical element there. Together, they communicate a message.
Yep.
So copywriting is really just like the oldest form of design. It's just, it's what our brain needs to see in order to understand what's going on. So I really consider them linked personally. I think there's maybe some other people that have a different opinion about that and say, well, copywriting is very separate. It's its own skill set. And it is, but it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, you could have a great branding expert, like someone that writes copy for Apple, for example. Apple always has like beautiful copy. And it sounds really cool. It's great for brand. But in terms of converting someone, it's actually not that good.
Yeah.
Copywriting, like effective copywriting, you're finding what the pain point is. Like, you're defining the pain point so that they can relate to what you're talking about. And then you provide an amazing and attainable solution, because it has to be amazing to attract them, but it can't be too amazing to where it's not attainable. Then it's like too expensive, but it can't be too attainable either, because then it seems cheap. So you have to balance that. It has to be attainable and amazing. And then you want to provide some proof and credibility there, whether that's testimonials, other people backing up that amazing and attainable solution. And then you want to have the call to action. Like, all that needs to be communicated in the copy. So if you're just saying like really fancy, beautiful words that maybe sound fancy and nice,
it don't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. You're not going to communicate that. You're not going to communicate the sense of urgency or the need. So anyways, I think the copywriting is so important. You can also be too salesy with it though, and lose touch with the brand. So it's an interesting balance. And yeah, I think if someone really wants to become a great marketing website designer, like, they should learn the basics of effective copywriting that converts.
It's funny you say that, 'cause so as our team, we do paid media. Paid media is a big part of SearchLogic's blood, everything we do at the ecosystem there. And it's one of those things where oftentimes we're kind of stuck using copy that's on the website, because how Google works is if we write something that's super magical and special and our ad copy, but it isn't related on the website, we're going to get penalized. So we can write the best ad copy ever, and Google's going to say, "Wah." Or we can write the best ad copy ever, but then we have to rewrite it 15 different ways to make our headlines fit, and 5 different ways to make our descriptions fit. So we come into this really awkward position, and we had this position earlier this week, actually, where a client was looking at their ad, and they looked at us and they went, "The ad looks like shit. It doesn't say what it is." And ironically enough, in this situation, it was like a Shopify integration type situation. And he was right. The ads look like crap. Because what happens is Google makes us write 15 different headlines, and they cannot be the same. They cannot overlap, and they cannot be redundant. They have to be equally unique. And you can't say the same thing. That's weird. You can't say the same thing over and over again and just expect the ad copy to basically, read. Because you think about it, if I say we're the best web developers ever on line 1, and then on line 15, I say we're the best web developers you've ever met. Well, those are too similar, because what's going to happen is in the ad copy, it's going to say we're the best developers who are in the world, and we're the best developers you've ever met. Like, it's going to say basically the same thing back to back, because Google uses those 15 headlines and creates like 15 to the X power of ad variants.
Oh, interesting.
It's really weird. So copywriting is such a strange thing in our world, because we have such little control over how the ad shows.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm getting all this great Apple emoji
Speaking of
goodness
design elements and
man, good job, Apple.
Experience.
This is going to look wonderful on YouTube. But it's one of those things where like we have such a limited control. And the thing is, every time you pin, which is saying this headline must be here. Every time you pin that, Google penalizes you as far as your rank. So if you put 3 pins, they penalize you down to like good versus excellent. But that's the messaging you need to say. Like, it's one of those things where all 14 other copies are just basically fodder, and you have 3 that are really important, and you have to be like, well, sorry, like the core value proposition has to be here. And when it comes to the website, we're trying to pull that content from the website, because that's where Google's looking to validate what we're saying is contextually relevant to the website. So it's just like Google has taken all the copywriting creativity out of marketers' hands, and they basically just go, the standard I think right now is Google goes, just trust us. No, we gotcha. Just trust us. And meanwhile, the 15 A/B variations they put together look horrible. And so it's just one of those challenges where like we're fighting against Google and the AI instances. So that brings me to my next question for you is, how do you feel like AI, right now we're seeing AI completely cause us just heart attacks every day with our ads, because Google uses AI to optimize, and it's a black box, right? So we are dealing with this black box of information. How do you guys deal with the upcoming, propensity of AI, Chat GPT's dominance in the market right now? People are adapting this technology and trying to build whole websites with it. Like, how are you seeing that? You don't have to, predict what you think it's going to be in the next 5 years, but how are you seeing that impact you guys now?
Yeah. Not a whole lot, to be honest. I think the biggest impact that I've seen is from some prospects asking about AI.
Okay.
That's the biggest impact. Yeah. They're like, hey, is there some way to sort of use AI for this solution? Like, we're constantly getting asked that. And we're dabbling in AI. I mean, I wouldn't say it's something that we're spending a ton of time on, but we're learning about it. We're investing our time in it. I'd say that's the biggest thing. It's so hyped up right now. There's so much talk about it. Yeah. And no doubt it's going to be extremely disruptive for our industry and many industries. But right now I don't see anything that is too critical. There's GitHub's Copilot. There's a lot of really cool things, but at most it saves you maybe, 10% efficiency, and maybe a little bit more for a senior developer. That's one thing I thought was interesting, is that our senior developers like it more or find it more useful than our junior developers, because they know the right questions to ask.
The prompts are important.
So there's some efficiencies there, but it's certainly not anything. I mean, 10 to 15% is no small number, but that's pretty much the extent of I see. And then I also see, platforms coming out, like we just heard about an insurance platform that's integrating AI, which insurance is kind of an old industry. Like it's sort of seen that way.
Yep.
And I think it is in a lot of ways, but there's one company that's integrating AI into their policies. And I think it's really interesting. I think it's going to be a game changer for them. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of industries doing the same.
Very cool. Very good answer. Yeah, I'd say for us, AI, we deal with AI a little bit differently, right? Like, so we talked about what Google does with AI, right? That's not Chat GPT. That's just Google's algorithms. And we're limited also by, what Google's trying to do as far as their bidding, there's these things called PMAX that are now available to us. And PMAX is basically Google's way of legally forcing you to use all their networks regardless of performance. And they don't have to tell you what you're actually showing on. So you don't know whether you're showing on Google Search, Display Network, on YouTube, on Google Discovery ads. Like, they don't have to disclose anything because it's part of the black box. So for us as marketers who have been doing this for years, it's an absolute travesty. And you're trying to explain why things are happening or changing, and it's like, well, the AI is just doing it. You have to just kind of trust Google, which is such a disheartening position to be in when you're talking to a client. And oftentimes, it doesn't work. You don't know why it doesn't work, or it did work. And you don't know why it didn't work. So you can't capitalize on it manually. So AI is an interesting element because the systems that are at play don't want you to necessarily know. But so the other side of the AI tool, and Billy and I use this a lot, is when it comes to scalability, right? Billy and I, as either co-owners in one company or owner and manager in another, we have to write a lot of process. We have to write a lot of process documents. We have to write a lot of formatting documents. We have to do a lot of things that are just, it's important, but it's a lot of brain work that isn't necessary, right? And so we use Chat GPT a lot of times for formatting and putting together like a really good format that we can then go through and kind of put some good quality behind. But I don't want to have to think about how I'm going to organize and structure this, competitive analysis report. Like, great, you know what I mean? Or I don't want to have to take, we don't have necessarily a research partner to go research 5 different firms and look at all the PR that came out. Okay, well, tell me more about what you're seeing for these 5 companies. What's their current SWOT analysis? What's their current VC funding? What's their current go-to-market, strategy based on what you can tell? And it comes up with some really great baseline content for you to go, okay, that saved me an hour and a half to 2 hours of research. Now I can use that research to figure out what I'm going to pull from that and make it into an actionable plan. So for us, John Oliver said it really well. He goes, AI is not going to replace lawyers. Lawyers who use AI is going to replace lawyers who don't. And I think it's a really good point. You know what I mean? Like, developers are not going to go away because of AI, but senior developers are going to become better at what they do because they can have a tool that can fact check, that can check their code to make sure there's no bugs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
100%.
you can look at all those kind of elements.
Yeah. And even on the non-technical side, I mean, I manage our business development team. One of our salespeople, he's less technical. And we were talking about a way to basically, for him to better understand projects. So when a client reached out and said, hey, here's a few bullet points of what I need, how much is this going to cost? And it's not enough information for him, but he doesn't know the answers to ask right away. Yeah. So all he did was, copy and paste that, put it in a ChatGPT and say, hey, what type of project might this be? And then it tells him, oh, well, it looks, at that point he was able to figure out, okay, looks like this is a mobile app. It wasn't quite clear in the email.
Gotcha.
And then from there, it's like, well, I need to give them a detailed, accurate estimate. What follow-up questions would you ask? And then it gives them the, and ChatGPT is so cool. It gives it and puts it in like categories as well.
Yep.
And some of those questions, were a little bit overkill, but just by having that list, he was able to take it to our technical team and just say, hey, I'm going to just send these questions. Are these good? And they're like, oh, take that one out. Take that one out. Saved a lot of time. And it also taught him in the process, you know, as he's asking, as long as he's reading what ChatGPT is saying, like you're going to learn a lot too along the way.
Agreed. No, that's good. Billy, any thoughts on that? I know you're a big chat proponent. I know. Any thoughts or feedback on that put?
Yeah, the way that I look at chat is condensing the workflow, right? So what can I remove from my day-to-day workflow utilizing chat? And yes, the key is the proper prompt. So I almost spend as much time building a good prompt as maybe it would have taken for me to do the original assignment, but the end result typically is better, right? So
more robust for sure.
Any way that I can remove the element of time for not unnecessary work, but certainly work that can be done quicker, I think that's always a win, right?
Yep.
But I'm 100% on board with it and excited about it. It's just a matter of learning it and adapting to it because it's here. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
And recognizing the risks, right? Like what what positions should be using it and how should they be using it. You know, that element as well. You know, you don't want to literally hire a copywriter that just puts it in chat, sends it out and goes, here you go.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, it's interesting. People are definitely going to be, you know, using it to finagle themselves into some pretty interesting positions.
Yep.
You know that for sure, right? Whether they're going to be,
admittedly,
frauding people or what, you know?
Yep. I got a task to do a G2 review. It's a company we work with, we like a lot, asked us to do a review on G2. So I basically wrote up my review in chat and said, hey, help me, you know, make this better. And so it did. And then immediately G2 is like, no, we sensed AI content. You have to do it again. I was like, what the hell?
Interesting.
And so I went and I rewrote it, submitted it again, and said, no, we still sense AI content. You need to do it again. We want your personal feedback. And I was like, damn. Like, it wasn't like a bot. Like I put everything I wanted to say in there. It just formatted it better for me. You know what I mean? So it didn't sound so, you know, rushed, because I was rushed. And so I had to go in and just do it all over again. But I was like, man, if G2 is recognizing AI content, you know, Google's like, nah, get out of here, buddy.
Right. Wow. That's really interesting.
And SEOs all over are trying to figure out how to leverage that, right? And we have really good SEO partners, and they have their own opinion on chat. It's just really interesting to see kind of how those are playing out. It's coming a lot quicker than people realize, as far as like the detection of automated and AI written content. That people thought that wasn't going to be available for 5 to 10 years. No, it's already here.
Well, that's good as far as I'm concerned. I think I'm glad that there's there's probably going to be a cat and mouse game in that.
You want to hedge against the worst actors, right?
Exactly.
You don't have a bad faith discussion about something that's super important. You want to make sure everyone's buying in and everyone has the same level of integrity in that discussion, right? So you want to make sure all the lines are basically, you know, covered. So we're getting close to the end of this, but I think there's one topic that is on my end, and we talked about it a little bit. And so if anybody doesn't realize this, and this is something that I think is super important, it's going to come down the line. Google recently announced in a recent webinar that we can expect third-party cookies to be deprecated. At least a minimum of 1% of all the third-party cookies on your Chrome browser will go away in January. People don't realize how dependent they are on third-party cookies. And so for those of you who don't know, and maybe who never realized what a third-party cookie is, if you go to Mashable, right? You're on Mashable and you're going through their content, reading about the newest, you know, Meta Quest 3. Well, Meta has a pixel on their website, and they're going to be putting a code on your browser that says this person came to our site, and we want to make sure they recognize the opportunity. So Mashable can then do some remarketing. Mashable's partners can remarket. Facebook's pixel is now on your website, so they can technically see your data as far as, you know, what you were looking at, so they can try to remarket to you. And Facebook can deny it all they want, but I don't know how many times I've said, it was PopSocket, and all of a sudden I see a PopSocket ad. As someone running ads, I can't select voice chat, but I tell you, they're listening, because it's proved itself over and over again. But the third-party cookies are something that most people don't realize exists. Most people don't realize how much it impacts their day-to-day browsing, and most people don't recognize how it impacts their advertising. So third-party cookies, for those of you who are just kind of new to this, imagine if you were on Facebook and all you really got ads for was General Motors, diapers, and what's a really good other one? Mutual funds. But you're a 14, or let's call it 18-year-old woman who's interested in dance, ballet, recitals, and her Pomeranian. You don't have anything to do with mutual funds. You don't need diapers. But all of a sudden, you're seeing ads for diapers and mutual funds. Well, why is that? Because personalized advertising is where Google and Facebook are using those data points to better curate an experience for you, using ads that you are more likely to buy and have a higher propensity to purchase. Your consumer intent is higher on that purchase than it would be if you were just getting served a random ad for apple juice and diapers and mutual funds. Because when we know that, as a marketer, I'm going to say when we know that you're interested in your Pomeranian, I can then go to a company that sells dog gear and dog food and make sure that they recognize that you have the healthiest, cleanest, most groundbreaking dog food that any dog has ever had. But they're not going to know that as a consumer if we don't have the signals that tell us that you're dog friendly, right? So, but people don't realize how important that third-party advertising is. But because of the whole cookie and the personal identification type stuff and the identity resolution type stuff that's happening in Congress, it is getting to a point where you are going to start seeing less and less and less relevant ads unless you explicitly say, yes, I'm okay with that, right? So what Google is doing in January is basically saying Chrome browser can no longer keep 1% of the cookies it has in its inventory. As of Q2 to Q3 of next year, Google has stated that cookies will be basically null and void. They're going to get all third-party cookies out of the Chrome browser. And Safari has already started doing this. As of iOS 17, they've already started redacting a lot of the IDFA cookies, a lot of the cookie tracking for Facebook, a lot of the pixel tracking that happens for like Google Analytics, a lot of the data sets that you have there, it is already cutting that through. So with all this happening, I reached out to these guys, Adam and his team, and said, hey, we need to make sure that we have first-party data cookies. So first party is where you collect the information and you voluntarily give it to someone, not a third party collects it for their own needs. We were saying as the website owner, we collected information that you like dogs, and we're going to voluntarily give you our data saying that this customer that we have likes dogs. Please give them more information about dogs, right? So I reached out to Adam and his team and said, hey, enhanced conversions is going to be the solution for this problem. And for those of you who don't know, enhanced conversions is essentially when you go through a conversion funnel, you click on a lead and you download that lead funnel, you're going to get an email, phone number, some basic information as part of that lead funnel. What Google's asking us all, and going to be requiring soon, is that we voluntarily pass that email, phone number, and basic data back into Google as hashed protected data. So it's not going to be transparent. Google's not going to be able to read your phone number, but it's hashed data, so it goes into the algorithms and can get recognized with other data signals. But they need us to voluntarily push that back into their system as a first-party data set that they can then leverage. So with that being said, a little bit of background, a little bit of story. It's an important thing happening in the next 6 to 9 months, and it is going to dramatically impact conversions. Google is forecasting up to 30% of your conversions are already being lost due to you not having first-party data set up, and your chances of seeing another 30% get culled are even higher coming through July. So putting that out there, really, really important kind of stuff. So Adam, your team, what is it you found after we talked about this and you kind of went to do a little bit of research, talk to your team, and obviously, you're still researching this. I don't expect a hypothesis or a theory necessarily, but what are some of the insights that you gained from this as a developer, mindset?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, I'm not super close to this project. Our sales team is basically fielding a lot of the questions and bringing it through our development team. But the research that I've done, it was kind of startling because, you first brought this to me, Bryan, maybe a few weeks ago, and I wasn't really aware of it at all. And it kind of triggered my brain to go, well, is this true? Like, it sounded so outlandish and kind of grandiose that I thought, well, maybe this is not the full picture. Maybe
you just met me. I could have been a bullshitist.
That's true. I could have been. Maybe that was part of it too. But yeah, I ended up digging into it and just doing some Google searching and reading some articles. And yeah, this is a real major change that's happening. And I think, that's the biggest thing that I can share for the audience is do your own research. This is definitely coming. And I'm not quite sure what all the solutions are. We're exploring that ourselves. I know you guys are too. So we're exploring it together, and we're going to try to adapt as quickly as we can. But there's no doubt there's going to be lots and lots of money lost, and there's going to be some ineffective ads out there. Unless some changes are made. So
it's true.
Yeah.
So some of the solutions we're already seeing. One of them is WordPress does have some good plugins, and those plugins will create a data layer. So this is going to get a little technical here for anybody who cares to. The data layer is what's needed on the back end of the code to say email address is this script, right? Phone number is this script. And those are the scripts that Google is asking to have pushed back to them. So as a marketer, what we do is we'll build a Google Tag Manager script that says, look for these different variables. So phone number, email, name, and then make that into a field inside Tag Manager that we can then reference. It's kind of like an e-commerce transaction value, right? In order to have any kind of transaction counting, you need an e-com transaction value, an e-com transaction ID. Those variables need to be accessible within Tag Manager as a value, as a data layer. So what we will do is work in Tag Manager to pass that data layer back into the Google code, usually a pixel, to voluntarily push that information back into Google. Again, it's hashed. But that process is challenging if the developer doesn't already have the data layers on the site. So if you are dealing with this and you're having, you're going through the process and you're having an issue getting this to connect, let us know. We can definitely help with this. We can work with your developer. We can work with Adam and his team to make sure the data layers are put onto your code so that on the thank you page, it actually has the transaction ID, the revenue number, the phone number as a bit of code that we can then grab and use as a revenue variable or a transaction variable and pass that back to Google. But if that data has not been created by the developer that you have now, it's going to be required. There's some ways to go around having the data variable created by the developer. Google has some really great experiences where they show that, but it's by far the easiest way is to have the data layer variable applied to the back end of your site. It's an easy function that the developers can do fairly quickly if they just need to understand why and what it is. So if you don't understand what a enhanced conversion is, if you don't understand what enhanced conversion tracking is, or even what Facebook's conversion API is, or if you're starting to see your conversions go to shit, we need to have a conversation because right now this is a big deal. And people like Adam and I are going to be really deep into this in the next 6 months because everybody who runs advertising is going to have this problem. It's not going to be insulated to one or two people. Everybody's going to get impacted. So get ahead of it now because it's going to be a flood of people and your developers are going to get overwhelmed by people coming to them asking for help because it's going to be something they can't avoid or they don't realize why they're seeing the challenges they're seeing.
Yep. It's good. I can feel the passion.
Every day, man. Trying to get this done with every client. It's one of those things where we have seen a direct impact. We have a client, as an example, we were using enhanced conversions versus their standard. And by nature, we were seeing over a $30 average lower CPA on the enhanced conversions than we were in Google Analytics GA4 data. The numbers were that much different between what we were seeing from that pixel versus the GA4 when the enhanced conversion was in place. I mean, you're talking a $30, from $100 to $130. That's a big difference in your performance.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Well, thank you so much for your time. We've already taken up about an hour of your time. I really appreciate you guys. If you are interested in any web development projects, if you're an agency looking for a development team that you can outsource to, White Rabbit and Adam's team are fantastic. We can vouch for them. They have been a wonderful partner for us to work with. We're just starting that relationship, and so far it's been wonderful. If you don't want to reach out to them, Adam, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, just go to our URL. Our website is whiterabbit.group. They can take a look at our work there. Right in the hero section, there's a Let's Talk button that plugs them right to my calendar. So happy to chat with anyone anytime.
Love it. Last question before we go. I'd like to put out a fun question. What was your first concert? Let the team.
My first concert.
Yeah. What was your first concert experience?
Concert. We're talking about concert here. Yeah. Tom Petty.
Tom Petty. That's a good one.
Ooh,
I know. That's a good one.
That's a real good one.
I know. Yeah. Sleep Train Amphitheater. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. Billy, what was your first concert?
I can't remember. It's probably some church concert. I grew up in church.
Fair.
Some ska band that was at some church, I'm sure.
You know what? Probably.
Oh, man. I haven't heard ska in a long time. That's funny.
My Boston's.
It's a way back.
So my first concert was Rod Stewart, and I was probably only like 5.
Wow.
And I remember standing on the little chair, the little stool, or the bleacher bench, and being as young as I was and small I was, this very, very large woman who was standing next to me had a seizure and was like swallowing her tongue, and she fell on me. Literally collapsed on me.
Oh my goodness.
While I was standing on the seat, and like took me to the ground, and they had to come like get her off of me and have obviously some medical treatment. It was I don't remember the concert very
memorable
well, but I remember
experience.
that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I know, crazy, right? All right. Well, that
That's
was
wild.
fun. I
That
always
is.
like good concert stuff. Adam, thank you much for your time. We really appreciate it. Billy, thank you as well. And we are the SmarTech
Yeah.
Spotlight. I hope
Absolutely.
you've enjoyed this conversation with White Rabbit Group. And tune in for our next interview. We'll be discussing some wonderful things with some great partners of ours. Thank you much, everyone. Talk soon.
Thanks. Bye.